95% of what drives us is subconscious. We're just puppets of what was conditioned in us when we were children. I'm terrified every freaking day of my life. I am terrified every day. And I get up and I get out and I show up anyway. If you're triggered, if you're in fight or flight, you can either fight, run, or hide. There was a fourth one, which is called fawn. I just learned this. You can run, hide, or freeze, or fawn, which is connect. Guard your to-do list like a junkyard dog. So take your to-do list out, look at it, and figure out, take everything off your to-do list and have it fight to be on your to-do list.
Hey everyone, welcome to Flow Over Fear. It's great to have you here today because I have a great guest who has an amazing story of overcoming significant challenge and achieving his best life. My guest today is Mark J. Silverman. And when he was 27 years old, he was homeless. And a decade later, he became a millionaire after generating over $90 million in sales for some of the fastest growing startups in the world. And today, he is an executive coach helping CEOs, senior executives, and high achievers leverage their resources and team for greater impact. He is also the host of the Rising Leader podcast, which is available on all the podcast platforms. Mark is the author of the best-selling book, Only Tens 2.0, Confront Your To-Do List, Transform Your Life, which has sold over 75,000 copies. And his new book, The Rising Leader Handbook, Turning High Achievers into Effective Leaders, is coming out as we speak. So, Mark, thank you so much for joining us. It's an exciting resume. I'm excited to dig in with you.
I'm just so thrilled to be here, going through all the guests that you have and the conversations you have. This is exactly the life I've lived. You know, you and I have lived parallel universes. That's right.
Yeah, we both kind of come from that background. I mean, fortunately I was never homeless, but we all have like kind of our backstories that shape us. And one thing that I get from a lot of the guests, and I'm pretty confident I'll get this from you too, is that from those significant challenges, we experience this tremendous growth, or this platform for growth that we can either choose to lean into that victim mentality of just like, I'm a victim of my circumstances and nothing will change, or I could pull myself by my bootstraps, make the changes I need to make, and do what I need to do. Which side of the coin are you on that? I'm sure I can answer that for you, but I'd love to hear from you.
It depends on the time of day. There are days when I can walk around being a whiny little victim, and I'm a leadership coach. So there are hopefully more moments where I am the owner of my own experience, the creator of my life. But it depends on which part of the day and what's happened. And I think a good whiny little rant to a person who you trust is very, very useful to get it out so that you can get to that creator of your experience part. So I run the gamut all day, every day.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, as far as getting it out of your head, at least if it's sitting in your head, it rattles around and stays there forever. But if you get it out of your head, trust either with a trusted confidant or on a piece of paper, I think that's a great idea. And so I want to kind of get into your backstory because it's intriguing and I think a lot of people can resonate with some of what you've gone through. So can you kind of share where you came from, how you grew up, and what got you to living in a truck at the age of 27?
Really, really good choices.
Always, right?
Good choices in business acumen were my two tools to get to live in my truck. No, it was basically, I grew up a kind of an asthmatic kid and short and just not one of the popular dynamic humans on the planet. And the way I got popular was stealing drugs from my brother and selling them.
Oh, yeah.
The way I got popular, right, was stealing money from my older brother, God bless him, because he was a waiter and he had cash everywhere, and, buying booze for everybody, right? The way I overcame all of the social anxiety, all of everything, was drugs, alcohol, and buying my way in. And that turned into, rather than just a high school thing, when I went to college, It was a choice. I couldn't, I was always envious of people who could party in college and actually get a degree. It took me, 2 months to completely flunk out of college and wind up being a bartender. Uh, and bartending, for me was pretty glamorous. I started working in the coat check, making $100 a night with all I could drink. Like that was so much more fun than college. So I had no grounding in what creating a life. You're going to be alive at 25, 35, 45, and you're going to have to do things to get there. None of that ever occurred to me. And I found out later in my late 40s when we were testing my son for ADD that I had ADD, but I had the part of my brain that has executive function doesn't light up. When the psychiatrist told me that, he says that's dormant in you. So basically, I'm a sociopath or a psychopath or something, right? Like, so I really never had any executive function to create a life. So that led to bartending and partying, and I had a great time until I didn't.
Yeah.
And so I wound up, just maxing out all my credit cards, getting thrown out of where I was living several times and living in my truck. And my brother lived in Washington, D.C. Called him up to borrow some money. And there was no Venmo back then. There was no internet. It was 1989. So getting money from someone was really hard when you're living in a truck. So he asked me, he says, why don't you're driving all around the country living in your truck. Why don't you drive to D.C. and get some money? When I got here, he looked really strange to me. He and his friends all looked really weird. Their heads were really small.
Oh, wow.
And what I found out was they were all bodybuilding.
Oh, really? Oh.
And they were bulking up, and I couldn't figure out why their heads were small, and they were all sober. Right.
Oh,
So
yeah.
in Georgetown, in Washington, D.C., the cool thing in 1989 was to be part of AA and NA and get sober. So he had this whole group of sober friends, and he was basically like the mayor of Georgetown. He owned a bunch of the most famous restaurants in Georgetown. So I came to borrow some money. I had no place to go. He let me live with him. He told me I had to go to college. I had to go to the gym with him and his friends, and I had to learn to run and do all these things. And I'm like, I got no place to go. So I wound up, enrolling in college, getting a job at the Four Seasons, waiting on tables and getting sober. And
That's incredible.
And that, it's so funny. You take alcohol out of that. You surround yourself with people who are actually trying to live a life. All of a sudden, you start to get traction in creating something different.
Yeah, there's so many directions I want to go with that, because you're telling my story early on too. I mean, from the idea of the social anxiety to trying to, to being reinforced through the bad habits that you're getting into, like drinking or drugging or things like that, to even going into bartending and then further having it reinforced. I was a bartender for a few years. And obviously that doesn't necessarily help with the problems, but
I was voted best bartender in New Haven, Connecticut.
Oh, that's amazing.
Then I quit drinking and quit cocaine and got fired immediately because I was no fun anymore.
Well, that's yeah. Well, talk to me about the social anxiety a little bit, because you touched on that at a younger age, and I'd love to hear how that existed in your young life. How did social anxiety come to be in your life when you were younger?
So I wouldn't brand it social anxiety for me. I just never felt like I fit in. I've never felt like I was cool. I got ostracized in my neighborhood when I'm realizing that a lot, you do trauma work when you start to go in your 40s and 50s and you actually want to grow. You start doing, and you realize all those things that happen in your childhood shape how you see things. And I got violently ostracized from my neighborhood when I was a kid. So I was always distrustful of any groups of people, because at any moment the shoe could drop. So I just never felt comfortable around people. And to this day, the day I quit drinking, I realized I was an introvert. To this day, as confident as I am in who I am, as grounded as I am in spirituality and the work that I've done, I still don't like groups of people. I'm not a group of people kind of person. I love being on stage. I love, leading a workshop, and then I like to leave.
Man, we have that in common as well. I consider myself a social introvert because I love being on stage. I love performing. I love communicating with groups. But if it gets too long, man, you get drained, don't you? I mean, it's a lot, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
people used to say to my wife that they we in the neighborhood that we moved into, that they didn't believe that she had a husband, because I would
yeah,
go to parties with her, and I would do the Irish goodbye, 15 minutes in, which is I'd go to the bathroom and never show up again, and I go home and hang out with the kids, right? Like I just did that over and over again, and people got to know that Mark didn't stick around.
yeah. Do you think that introversion or that and understanding that there was some trauma there that led to that? Do you think it was kind of looking at the chicken and egg argument here? Do you think that was caused by a lot of the early trauma, some of the ADD that you were having,
I do.
or
I do.
yeah, okay,
I think a lot of my need to leave a networking event is the trauma. My choice of wanting to be alone and enjoying my own company and the things that I do, that's not. But when I'm not a choice, when it's like overwhelming, I've got to get out of here, that's trauma, right? That's conditioning.
yeah. What have you done in since getting sober and all of that, and working through some of that trauma work? What have you done that has helped you to manage that, that anxiety that you get in those social situations? Is there anything that you do in particular?
I think of it about like the outside in,
Hmm.
and then the inside out. Like it's a both end kind of thing. I need skills and practices, but I also need to do the work. So like as a leadership coach, I talk about how, I can teach you communication skills. I can teach you how to have honest conversations and do all those things. But if we don't go underneath, if we don't go inside to who you're being, to what drives you, 95% of what drives us is subconscious, right? We're just puppets of what was conditioned in us when we were children most of the time. I hate to, burst anybody's bubble that think that they're a free thinker, but most of our thoughts, our feelings, everything, including the chemicals that go through our body, are conditioned responses. But so for me, doing trauma work like EMDR, which is the rapid eye movement and the light and and tapping, and then going to experiential weekends where I beat up a pillow and beat up all the people who rejected me when I was a child, right? Doing those kinds of things and getting that out and getting to take it out and look at it objectively from being an adult and looking at what happened as a child, what I made it mean, the decisions I made, gives me a fighting chance to take the skills that I've learned. So I've learned to listen. So when I go to a networking event, what I've learned is I come prepared with questions, right? So I go to a networking event and I ask questions of people. I take a deep breath because I know me. If I don't breathe deeply, my voice is higher. I'm more animated, and I'm a little more, I'm trying to be extroverted, and it just doesn't come up. If I take a deep breath, I learn to listen. I learn to ask questions. Then I'm more interesting, right? So I've learned, so I have those skills, but I had to learn how to breathe and how to ground and center myself before I could use those skills, right? Then I play a game with myself that if I have three meaningful conversations at a networking event, I can leave.
Set rules
So,
for yourself. I love
right.
that.
So, like, because there's the little kid in me that I don't want to dishonor the little kid in me that wants to get out of there. I'm like, look, dude, look, we need to go to this thing, right? There's some people we want to talk to. We do three good conversations and we get out of here. And it works. It helps so much because we were joking how we don't like groups of people, and I'm not a people person. I'm a person, right? So one on one, I'll talk to you in the corner for hours about what makes you tick, what your problems are. Like, let me be valuable to you, right? And those are the skills that I've learned.
I love that, and I like that. I love that idea of not suppressing your inner child that is that wants to leave, but kind of working with him and saying, hey, we're just gonna, I understand, you don't want to be here. We want to leave, but we're just going to speak to three people. I love that rule because, for someone like me, I can totally understand where you're coming from on that. Being an introvert, wanting to get out of there, not wanting to make the calls or not wanting to do that, and just that, man, that 800-pound phone or that brick wall that's in front of you and the other people at the party. That's hard to get over when you have that issue.
It's funny
So
because you can teach a salesperson you need to make 25 phone calls a day, right? And some people will be able to make the phone calls. Like for me, I couldn't pick up the phone. I couldn't do it. Now you would think, oh, he's just being weak. Instead of understanding that I had a childhood belief that the world will reject me and that isn't rational, right? So I forced myself and I became a very successful sales guy figuring out my own superpowers. But that it wasn't until later in life when I went, oh, of course I wouldn't want to pick up the phone. Every time I pick up the phone, my life was over,
yeah.
according to that little kid.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Talk to us about that story too, because that's interesting because coming from this background of trauma and then alcoholism, addiction, to living with your brother and actually getting sober and joining the sober community. But you went on to become a very high powered salesperson. Selling $90 million in sales in the tech. And how did that transition happen for somebody who's an introvert who was afraid to pick up the phone? Talk to us about that.
It was really interesting. So a few years into my sales career, I was part of a men's group, and I was the most successful guy in the group, which irony of ironies. And they asked me to speak on why I was so successful. And the only thing I had for them was, look, I'm terrified every freaking day of my life. I am terrified every day. And I get up and I get out and I show up anyway. I cannot tell you how many presentations I did sweating bullets. I'm a sweater. I can't hide the fact that I'm nervous. So I would go on these appointments, and if my engineer, I usually went with an engineer who would do the presentation for me, and if they didn't show up, I would stutter my way through, and I showed up every day. When I got my first sales job, it was my opportunity to change my life. When I asked my wife to marry me, I said, I may never be more than anything other than a waiter. It just may never happen. Are you okay with that? And she was okay with that. But when I got this opportunity for a job, I went for the first job interview. For a copy salesman. Like I wanted to get out of the restaurant business. So I went and I came back and the sales manager said, Silverman, you're a nice guy. Don't ever be a salesman. You just don't have what it takes. And when I had my Lexus, I came back a few years later. I said, I'm a millionaire. Thank you very much for motivating me. But what I learned was my superpower as an introvert is connecting with people. People trust me. People want to help me. And I honored that trust. When I crack that code of, oh, if I connect with people, if I serve them, and I didn't even know the word service then, but if I provided value to them, then once I'm in relationship, because again, I just learned this. I always thought it was if you're triggered, if you're in fight or flight, you can either fight, run, or hide, right? I didn't know there was a fourth one, which is called fawn. I just learned this. You can run, hide, right, or freeze, or fawn, which is connect. And that's my coping mechanism. I didn't run, hide, or I fawned. I create connection, which makes me safe. So that superpower, that trauma made me a super salesperson because people that I sold to 25 years ago became my clients when I became an executive coach. They were like, we don't even know what coaching is, but we're in, right? They're friends of mine. They've been on the CEOs have been on my podcast when I was a scared salesman back then because I learned how to connect with people. And that's how I became super successful as a salesperson.
That's a great example of how to turn something that would be considered a negative, significantly negative, into a positive, into something that is a superpower. And I've always had that firm belief that that fear, in some way, can be our superpower if we could channel it. I mean, just the intensity with which we feel it, just the intensity in which it comes through us. That there's a negative feeling for every positive emotion that we can experience with that. And that's the first time I've heard the fawn idea too, the connection idea too. And so it sounds like that's a healthy coping mechanism. Was it healthy for you to
No,
do that?
it
Or
wasn't healthy because I lost myself in people for years. I
ah,
was I was all things to all people all the
mm,
time, right? The
okay.
professional people pleaser. Everybody loved Mark because Mark was that guy, right? And it, to the point where it destroyed my marriage, it destroyed my career, it destroyed my health, it destroyed everything. Stone cold sober. I lost everything because I my only identity was that fawning with everybody that I met. Now, decades later, 61 years old, it's still a trap for me, but I see it. Right. I wrote a whole book. I thought I wrote a business book called Only Tens. It's a book about how not to be a people pleaser. It just happens to work with difficult conversations at work and holding people accountable and all that stuff. But I learned how to set boundaries. I learned how to say, saying no was again like death because you're going to reject me. Right. My mother would reject me if I said no. So that's all ingrained. And now I have enough autonomy. I've done enough work. I've done enough practice. I've taught this for so many years that I can use the superpower for my good.
Yeah. No, was that something where when you started teaching it, that's where you started learning it? I don't know if that question makes sense, but
It was actually so when I became a coach.
yeah.
When I left my $500,000 a year job to become a coach, and still had an ex-wife and two kids and elderly parents to take care of. I don't recommend changing mid-career at 50 years old. Um, uh, but and I do because it worked out great. But I couldn't, it turned out that I worked really well having an asshole sales manager.
Mm.
Right? I worked really well having someone I was afraid of and wanted to please. uh, that was motivating to me. When I was in my office by myself, and the only thing that was going to happen was something I was going to make happen. That was tough because with the ADD is like I still have it. If I see a health food restaurant recipe on Instagram that uses oatmeal to make brownies, I will leave my desk, be in the middle of the recipe, and go, "What the hell happened?" Right? So distraction was keeping me from doing the things I needed to do to run my business. And I was talking to my coach about that, and he said, "It's not true, Mark." He says, "It's just not true that you don't get the things done that you want to get done." He said, "Didn't you run the Marine Corps Marathon?" I said, "Mm-hmm." He said, "Didn't you make $1 million the year you said you wanted to make $1 million?" I said, "Yes." He goes, "So what it is you will accomplish what it is you want to accomplish, and you won't accomplish what you don't want to accomplish." I said, "You know what? I'm going to get myself a PhD in getting shit done with ADHD." And he's like, "Great." I said, "I'm going to write a book." He's like, "It's a pamphlet." I'm like, "Well, I'm writing a book." So that summer, I started writing this book called Only Tens. And it was me. I was only going to do what I wanted to do. And I wasn't going to do what I didn't want to do. Derek Sivers, hell yes, hell no. I was only going to follow that energy. And again, paying a bill, I started to see I don't want to pay a bill. I just don't want the late charge. So I want to pay the bill. So I started seeing underneath why I did things and why I didn't do things and what was my motivator. And I wrote this book, and we put it out in September 2015, and it sold 1,500 copies the first day.
Hey everyone, I interrupt this program to introduce you to a powerful tool that will help you gain clarity on your vision and accelerate your growth and achievement. If you're listening to this show, it is likely that you have an exciting vision for your life. But the problem is that we often get caught up in the day-to-day. We get distracted, we face uncertainty, overwhelm, and self-doubt. And as a result, the gap between where you are and where you want to be seems insurmountable. And that's why I created a framework for how you can turn your vision into strategic, disciplined action that will accelerate your results in the next 90 days. I call it the Vision Reflection Retreat. It is a 2-day solo excursion designed to reignite passion and adventure into your busy life and realign your focus toward your why. This is the very same framework that I use every 90 days to reflect on my own life and my vision and set my goals for the next quarter. And it has been a game changer. And the good news is that I'm giving away this Vision Reflection Retreat guidebook for free when you sign up for my newsletter. Simply go to flowoverfear.com/retreat and download your free guide and enjoy the journey.
That's incredible.
And my ex-wife is like, you don't have that many friends. I'm like, I know. And it sold another 1,000 the next day and the next day. And we're like, what's going on here? And it turns out that these things are universal. So like I say, you don't have a time management problem. You have an honesty problem, right? You don't know how to say no to the things you don't want to do or are not on your agenda. And you don't know how to say yes to the things because fear keeps you from doing those things, right? So that was my foray into learning this for myself. Was if I'm an entrepreneur and people depend on me, how am I going to get myself to focus on my business?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about only tens because I love this concept, and I especially love it from somebody with your background who's experienced the ADHD, that the problem with, or the issue with, getting distracted too easily. I personally have a problem with creating lists of, lots of to-dos, and I'll think of something. I'm like, this got to go to my to-do list. And now I have 4 pages of to-dos that I will never get to because they're just there.
Shit. They're the things that should have been done yesterday list that you're never going to get to. And that's the thing I talk about with people. I'm like, you are so full of shit. You are not going to do these things, and you don't have to do these things. You just think they're a good idea, or you want to please someone, or you feel responsible because it's on your list. But you got to get honest with yourself. And I can get someone's list from 4 pages to 5 items in 10 minutes.
Yeah, I love that. And that's why I kind of want to go through this is what are some of, and I don't want to give the book away. Everybody should buy that book.
They can get the book for free on my website.
That's fantastic.
I give the book away on my website.
Oh, that's great. Well, yeah. So go to Mark's website and pick that up. We'll give the link in the show notes but I think it's markjsilverman.com. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a big button that says resources. And by the way, if you don't want to read the book, which most of my clients won't read my book, they ask me to make little 5-minute videos. There's also little 5-minute videos so that you can do the entire book with just watching a few videos.
That's great. I mean, and that's so true to the concept of trying to remove that distraction or what have you. But yeah. So what if you could narrow it down into just a few items of what people should be doing in order to kind of remove that distraction from their own life if they're feeling distracted? What are some suggestions that you would have, like right off the bat?
Is to guard your to-do list like a junkyard dog. Like to take your to-do list out, look at it, and figure out, take everything off your to-do list and have it fight to be on your to-do list. And you'll see that you're putting things on your to-do list because there's a should. You're putting things on your to-do list because, so only 10s is a 10 has to be done today, and has to be done today by me, or the world's going to freaking end. Because the truth is nothing has to be done. Well, Mark, I need to feed my kids. No, you don't. You don't need to feed your kids. Well, they're starved to death. Oh, so you don't want your kids to starve to death. So you want to feed your kids. Oh, yeah. Right. So we start to get rid of that victim mentality of we have to pay the bills. You don't have to do anything. You do not have to do a thing. You want to stay alive? You eat. Right. So you start looking at those things that are on your list, and why did they get on the list in the first place? Oh, someone asked me to bake cupcakes for the PTA. And I said, yes, because I wanted to be liked. Okay. Do you want to be liked more than you want to get this thing done for work that you said you were going to get done? Like, you have to start making choices. And it's really hard if you're wired to be a people pleaser, or if you're wired to be an achiever. Like I know people who get their self-esteem from knocking shit off their list, right? I got everything done on my list every day. Great. Did you get the things done that were really important to you? what's not on the list that belongs on the list while you were being so productive. Steve Chandler, great author and godfather of coaching, he says, busyness equals laziness, right? You're busy because you haven't taken the time to figure out what's important, what you really want to accomplish, how you want to spend your time.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good point. And I'm really connecting with that. And I love that. And I think that you'll get a lot of traction with people here on that topic, because so many of us struggle with that to-do list of thinking that, oh man, I'm running a podcast, I'm running a business, and I want to help people and serve people in all this way. So yeah, that list can be, I mean, we're just overwhelmed with options of what we can do. So yeah, that to-do list can be super long. So I've always found, and I don't know if you found this to be true, but we spend, a lot of the first part of our life when we're trying to build credibility, having to say yes to a lot of things to get to that point of like, I want to make sure I'm getting the attention. I want to make sure that I'm getting, that I'm serving in the right way so that I can, expand my career. But there seems to be a tipping point where we have to start saying no to a lot of things. Otherwise we get overwhelmed. Have you found that? And at what point does that happen? Or is it just something we have to be aware of?
I read a story about Warren Buffett. And Warren Buffett was being, he has a plane and he's been flying around with his pilot, and it was towards the end of the year. And while they had time in the air, he asked his pilot, he says, write down 25 things you want to do next year. They're important to you. So the pilot writes down 25 things. And he says, I tell this story all the time. Now I forgot the whole point of the story. And he said, so what are the 5 most important things? And he figures out what those things are. He says, okay, now cross out the other 20, right? And those are your never touch, right? You're committed to never touching those things until those 5 things that are important are done, right? So focusing on what's real and what's important is the most important thing. And that's why it only tends for me. Like I woke up this morning and, yesterday was a full day, and today I have 2 podcast interviews. I have no clients for some reason. Today it was just completely open, and I woke up a little late. I always get up at 5:15, and I woke up a little late, and then my workout and everything, and I come upstairs and I go, oh my God, I'm running late, and I'm so behind. I'm already behind. That was my first thing. And I was like, oh. I actually have nothing that has to be done. I have things that can be done, but there's nothing pressing except do a little research to be on Adam's podcast and sound somewhat intelligent about what he's doing. So instead, I made some protein chocolate chip protein balls.
Mm-hmm.
Took a shower and got here.
Right. Oh, I love that. That's so. Yeah, I think that concept of removing distraction and by looking at your to-do list is such an important one. So I appreciate that. And I kind of want to get into the end of your career where you were doing sales, where you were really highly successful in that. You said you had an asshole boss that maybe contributed to this, but what led to the decision to make the jump to coaching? And can you kind of share that story?
Sure. So Steve Chandler, that coach that I was talking about, he was my first coach, and I had the most coveted sales position in all of tech. Like I got the job in the new startup. Like I've been in several, 4 times I've been in the fastest growing company in Silicon Valley history. I was able to say that in my presentation, right? And I was in the next one, and I talked my way into that job. And I had taken coaching courses as someone had suggested coaching, and my ex-wife said my ex-wife is the one who pushed me into coaching, even though she depended on me. She's like, this is what you were born to do. So I'm so appreciative of her. So I'm doing all and I told Steve, I said, dude, I said, he said, when are you going to become a full-time coach? I said, when I have $2 million in cash in the bank. And I said, I have responsibilities. I have, an ex-wife, 2 children. They live in a $1 million house. I want her to stay home until the kids graduate high school. I have my elderly parents who are both infirmed. I have to take care of them, all that stuff. And plus I kind of have a Hugo Boss habit.
Yeah.
So, and he just ripped me, he just ripped into me of why would you stay at a job that you hate? And my boss didn't like me at the time. I was forced on him. The CEO had me, recruited me, and he wanted one of his guys. So he just never liked me. So I just didn't, I hated the job, and I was done. I wanted to coach. Right. So I just, since I can't do 2 things at once like that, I just quit the job. What's really, really funny is every time you quit a job in tech, you get walked out the door immediately. You give your 2 weeks notice and you get walked out immediately. I have never been walked out the door. I'm like, I'm going to a competitor. They're like, we trust you. I'm like, why do you trust me? I want 2 weeks off. And they said, you know what, Mark? Why don't you stay for 3-4 months while you get your coaching business up and train your replacement? I'm like, well, I'll get my benefits, and that was great. So I did that. And then I hung my shingle out and became a coach.
Wow.
And proceeded to decimate my savings and do what entrepreneurs do until we were able to stabilize and figure out what it is I actually do, and to be able to charge the prices that I need to charge to actually make a living at this. So that was a lesson in entrepreneurship.
And so when you started, was it you started from scratch? You quit your job, start from scratch, and then go? That's wow. That's impressive.
I had 6 clients immediately.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And they were former tech executives that I used to work with. They were like, Mark, you always talk to me about my life. You always talk to me about my career. You always, like, of course you would do this, but I was charging, $1,500. I now charge more than that for an hour of my time, right? So I was, even though I was busy, I wasn't, I didn't, and I shouldn't have been charging that much money, right? Like, because I needed the skills, I needed the experience to grow as a coach. But that was a scary time of when is the finances going to catch up to what I need to have happen. And thankfully, the book sold like crazy, and I figured out who I am as a coach and what I do. Also, the other piece was, the people pleaser part. I do Enneagram testing, which is a personality test. People do DISC and all that. So I'm an Enneagram 2, which is the happy helper. And one of the things that I didn't know about myself was if people walked around talking about Mark Silverman as he's the most wonderful person in the world, people say, you need to talk to Mark. He's amazing. He's wonderful. I consider that payment, right? Because that validates me. And when I realized when I was Enneagram 2 that I am transactional, I will do anything for you as long as you tell me I'm wonderful, I was like, oh, I need to get paid for my services. Doubled my prices immediately. All of a sudden started making, but when I doubled my pricing, my practice went to a waiting list, right? Because all of a sudden I now knew the worth of what it is I was providing to the world.
That's a powerful lesson too for really establishing your worth. That's a hard one to kind of get to, because I know I was a triathlon coach for some time, and I was I was a same kind of way, just wanted to serve, but I was cheap, man. I did not charge what I was worth, and I wasn't getting a ton of athletes, and I wasn't getting the caliber necessarily until raising that price. That's a powerful method. So how long? So in that first few months of coaching, say, did you experience any regret for leaving, or did you experience any kind of?
We live in America. When I saw how much I had to pay for health insurance, for a family of 4, that was awesome. Having to pay my own American Express bill, that was awesome. And then having to figure out how to go talk to people, because what I realized is nobody really cared about me. Like once I didn't have a business card and a title and all this stuff, nobody's calling me up to
Yeah.
give me business. So I
Right.
had to go figure out how to go be out in the world and create business for myself.
Yeah. And how long did it take until you really established yourself to a point where you felt like you were making ends meet, you were excelling in that?
So I hit six figures pretty quickly, but six figures didn't cut it with a family of four and two elderly parents, right? So I was, and the great Steve Chandler, he says, "You call that successful, Mark?" I'm like, "I'm a six-figure coach." Because you call that successful when you're not meeting your actual needs. I'm like, oh, didn't never thought of that. I became a big deal in the coaching industry for a while because I was my coach was a big deal in the coaching industry. So I was kind of apprenticing with him. So I got known and I was coaching other coaches and and that wasn't where I belonged. I was doing okay. I was doing good. And then a friend of mine, Helen Appleby, who's an executive coach up in New York, she said, Mark, she says, you used to wear Hugo Boss suits and a gold watch and be in glass buildings and business. She says, that's where you belong. And that fear thing, right? When we talk about fear, I was like, oh, I didn't want to go back because, I'm now a coach and go back into the places that I used to be a sales guy. Um, that was scary for me. But that was the turning point when I realized I was a big fish in a pond that I don't swim in. I don't want to be a coach of coaches. I don't want to be in the new age world and all that stuff. I want to coach people who are in glass buildings, in the corporate world, in business, who never would pick up an Eckhart Tolle or Pema Trojan book, right? Like I want to coach the people who were dying when I was, striving to be in the 1%, thinking that that was the be all end all, and then watch their broken marriages and watch their health and their mental health and watch all that stuff. I want to help those people. And when I figured that out, that was when my career started taking off. And then my career went to the next level when a couple of years ago, when someone said to me, you want to move to group programs, what do you want to do? And we thought about only tens and mastering overwhelm and all these things. And again, my friend Helen Appleby said to me, why don't you do what you do all day, every day? And I said, what's that? She says, you teach leaders how to lead. She says, you're a leadership coach. Remember, we talk about fear. I have never called myself a leadership coach ever. I put out thousands of videos. I'm Oprah on my videos. I am not a leadership coach. I leave that to Simon Sinek and the former Navy SEALs and all those people to be leadership coaches. But it's what I do all day, every day. I coach some of the most powerful people on the planet and hold them to account and make them, into the people that they need to be to grow their companies, to be the best husbands and fathers and mothers and spouses, right? Like I do that all day, every day. And that's when the fear, again, being scared and doing it anyway, the imposter syndrome of me saying I'm a leadership coach. And that's how I make all my money, right? People pay me tons of money to teach them leadership, but I was terrified to go on LinkedIn and say, here's a leadership skill I'd like to teach you. And it took a year for me to actually do that. But when I realized that I coach fast rising high achievers and I teach them these leadership skills, I have a waiting list of people. I have people who will not let their coaching lapse. Like I keep thinking they're not going to renew. Like I am so blessed that I am right in the pocket of who I am, what I do all day, every day, that keeping the business full is effortless for me.
That's great. And I mean, you could hear the passion around that and hear like where you want to take these people. It's lighting me up. And
you were talking about, the whole premise of this conversation is fear and flow, right? Flow over fear. But I had to get through that fear of actually putting my hat in the ring with people who seem like they look like the poster child for what it is I do. I have a client who gave me so much confidence. He's a 6'4" 300-pound former rugby player, gruff guy, anger issues, right? And I was asked to coach him to help him become a better team member with all the other people. And he told his CEO after our first round of 6 months, He said, that little 5'7" pipsqueak is the only person I'll listen to.
Oh
Right.
man.
And that hearing those words told me, what I bring to the table is worth leaning into this fear. So I joke that I don't know that I'm alive unless I'm just a little bit scared and a little bit over my skis. Right. I live at that edge of where it's just a little too much for me and the plane is shaking a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm hearing there that, like, there's a common theme throughout this episode as far as fear is concerned, and it's that it's that the fear is not necessarily going away; it's there, but you're going through it anyway. You're pushing through it anyway, even though it's there, and you're growing from it. And I mean, you've seen this massive growth in every avenue that you've been in, from getting sober to building a $90 million sales empire to growing your coaching business. And what is the and I know there's never really an end result to coaching. There's continuous growth, but for your clients, what does success look like for them? What are you looking to achieve with your clients?
Well, we actually define that at the beginning of an engagement, and every time we renew, I don't renew until we define what it is we want to accomplish. But for me, again, I actually don't care how much money people make. I don't care how successful they are. I just don't care. I've seen too many miserable, successful people. I went out to dinner. I coach 2 executives at one company, and they asked me to go out to dinner with their wives when I was in their city. So I flew there, and I go out to dinner in this swanky restaurant. It was just lovely. And the wives start telling me, we love what you do for our husbands at the office, what you did with them and the growth that they have as leaders and all that stuff. But we want to tell you what you did for them as husbands, as fathers, what you did for our relationship. And I'm getting choked up now. I was bawling at the table, right? When a client tells me, I just went to the doctor and I've had high blood pressure all my life, and he just took me off of blood pressure medicine because I just don't have high blood pressure anymore. That's a win, right? When a CEO tells me that this person isn't chewing somebody's head off anymore, they're all of a sudden they're pleasant. That's I want people to enjoy life. I want people to enjoy success. I want people to be connected. That's my passion. I just use leadership as a tool.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. And you are writing you've written a new book that's being released now. Yeah, it's written and it's ready for release. I mean, your first book sold 75,000 copies. It went ballistic and was a bestseller. This one I can only imagine is stepping up from that. The Rising Leader Handbook. And so you share a lot of the advice that you give, the things that you've learned from leadership, from coaching leaders to help rising leaders to embrace their future selves. Is that can you talk a little bit about that and what's the book about?
Sure. So the Rising Leader Handbook is focused on leadership from 4 different perspectives. So again, when we codified how it is I coach my people, the first thing I generally do is teach them to lead up. I teach them to be trusted advisors. How do you speak truth to power? How do you set your ego aside to be supportive? How do you understand the pressure the CEO's under? Then leading across, how do you lead on a group of other powerful leaders who have agendas and ambitions just like you? So you have to cooperate, but you're also competing for attention and right. So that co-opetition on leading across. Then there's leading your team, which is how do you create success through others, and how do you create success through others so that the team is thriving, right, and the company's thriving. But all of that is a ruse. Get them to learn to lead themselves, to leading you, right? Because if I can get them to lead themselves, if I can get them to plant themselves and ground themselves into something bigger than them, then they can talk to the CEO. Then they can be confident on a group of people, right? Then they can go home and have an absolutely full life. I joke, I joke with my clients. I'm 61 years old, and most of my clients are like in their 30s and 40s. And I'm like, if I'm in better shape than you, we cannot coach together. Right. Like it is not okay for me to be in better shape than you at 61 years old. Because again, I can't teach you to be grounded and centered at work in a stressful situation if you have not been to the gym. Right? If you're drinking Diet Cokes for breakfast and you're not getting sleep, you are not going to be at your best when there's a crisis at work. You're just not going to be. Right. So like we got to coach the entire person. And that's what the whole Rising Leader Handbook is about, is how do you use the conversation, the difficult conversations you need to have, the interactions you have to become the best version of you. So it's basically it's an Iron Man at work.
Yeah, I love that idea because, I didn't realize this until I got into the role of CEO of my company, that if exactly what you're saying, if I'm not in the best health that I can be, or the best mental space, or at home, and I'm working on everything around, and I'm working on the whole person, I can't be effective for the team that I have. That's such a powerful message. And one, I think, that is almost counterintuitive to what we hear in the mainstream, that, like, the leader has to be engaged and doing everything and doing this. But no, really, they have to have the capacity to make the big decisions, to make those decisions from a healthy mindset. And if you're putting people into that perspective and teaching that in your book, I mean, I think that's a powerful message to lead with.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I was working with one CEO, and he was complaining that his team wasn't meeting their goals. The marketing team wasn't meeting their goals. The sales team wasn't meeting their goals. And he's like, I don't understand why people won't, perform at the level that they need to and keep their word. I said, how many times did you say you were going to go to the gym last week? He said, oh, I told you I was going to do 4 times. How many times did you go to the gym? I didn't go to the gym last week. So you don't keep your word to yourself. He goes, what's that got to do with anything? I said, you keeping your word to yourself is your example for your team to keep their word to their goals. Right? So if you say you're going to go to the gym 4 times, you go to the gym 4 times, then show up on the Monday morning meeting. Watch your energy shift in how you talk to your people when you have the confidence that you can keep your word to yourself.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And I think that exemplifies the idea of flow in leadership. Is, as we're tying this up, is creating the whole leader, creating that whole person, the healthy, engaged, person who's working on every aspect of their life. That creates an upward spiral. I mean, it flows. It creates a life of flow. So where can people can get the book on Amazon? Where would you like people to get the book, the Rising Leader Handbook?
Well, yeah, Amazon, anywhere that they can get a book. Only Tens was only on Amazon. That was the only way we knew how to put it out back at the time, and it did great. Now you can get Only Tens for free on my website. You can get a summary of the Rising Leader Handbook on my website also, markjsilverman.com, and then pick up the book, watch my videos, and if I can be of service, I would love to help.
That's so great. Thank you so much, Mark, for sharing that. We can go in so many different directions, and I would love to have you back to kind of dig in a little bit deeper and more focused on some of this stuff, because, man, you got a lot of energy, you got a lot of passion behind what you're doing, and it shows. And it shows with results and the flow that you're achieving. You've lived a life of transformation that I think a lot of people should aspire to be, and I think that you have a lot to give. And I'm grateful for you being here. For those of you who are listening to this, markjsilverman.com is where you can find Mark, and his book, The Rising Leader Handbook, is available now on Amazon. You can also pick up his book for his Only Tens book on his website for free. So do that as well. And Mark, where else can people find you if they want to reach out?
I'm told that it's Media Mark is all over social media. There's a camera in as we talk about being an introvert, there's a camera in my face everywhere. I share little tidbits from books and my talks and the podcast all over social media, LinkedIn, Instagram.
That's great. Thank you so much, Mark. This has been a pleasure and an honor, my friend. I appreciate it. And to everyone else out there, thank you so much for listening. And if you got a lot from this show, if you feel like this connected with you and it can connect with someone else, share it with a friend. Make the message out, get the message out there a little bit more. And yeah, a lot of gold was dropped in this episode. So thank you for joining us. And Mark, thank you for being here. We'll see you all soon. Thanks again.
Thank you so much for joining me today on Flow Over Fear. If you are liking this show, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. That way you'll be first to know when I drop a new episode, including interviews or trainings or dad jokes. That's right, dad jokes. Add a little levity to your life. And if you liked this episode in particular, and you think somebody can get something from it, please share it with a friend. And that way we'll spread the message together. Thanks again for joining me today. We'll see you next time.